This is Do It For a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
Don't be afraid to fail. You don't learn a whole lot in success, but you have tremendous opportunity to learn in failure.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It For a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back. I've got Jay Payson from HP Tuners with me today. We met Jay at the last Optima Streetcar Challenge event in New Jersey, and he was racing as a Mustang out there. And so we kind of chatted for quite a while, and HP Tuners is obviously a well-known company. You know, they do a lot of tuning chips for the most popular one that I know of is obviously the Corvettes, Camaros, Chevy stuff. But they also do Ford, obviously, because of his Mustang, and they also do Dodge as well. So, Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing very good. So thanks for taking some time out of your day to talk with us. And so you were one of the very first people they hired on after the owners decided to start expanding the business. So it's going to be a very interesting take on, you know, like the business as a original employee and kind of how it's grown from there and not as the owner. So why don't you go ahead and give us an idea of, like, what was your background, Jay? How did you get involved in cars? And then take us into you being a part of HP Tuners.
You know, my involvement in cars, probably like most people, goes way back to as long as I can remember, whether it be, you know, crashing up Matchbox cars in the front yard or trying to build a go-kart out of bicycle parts, so on and so forth. But I would say that passion was early on of pictures that I don't even remember my parents taking or happening that involved cars and motorcycles. In terms of the first real car project I had, it was in high school. I had a 76 Camaro, and the clutch went out, and it had a 350, 410 gear, limited slip, and a Saginaw transmission. And instead of just replacing the clutch, as most car guys do, they upgrade. So in my dirt driveway, I'm swapping a clutch all alone, not realizing how heavy this Saginaw transmission was. Pulling it out. I mean, it's cast iron. I, you know, thankfully didn't hurt myself, but got it swapped, and shoot, that was in a dirt driveway at 16 years old in the 80s. So that's pretty much the start of it. From there, I went to a big block 70 Chevelle. That was a Power Glide car. Lived a little too far from the racetrack to get back and forth and do any real racing. But
where was that?
That was in Norwalk, Connecticut. Okay. And Englishtown, New Jersey was about a 3-hour drive, and you had to deal with the city. And, you know, at that age, I didn't have a truck and trailer. And 410 gear in a big block. You know, I didn't want to deal with driving through New York City and finding fuel and so on and so forth. But we still had a tremendous time with the car, and it just really evolved from there.
Okay, so you were around 16 at that time, you said, right?
Yeah, thereabouts. Probably a little bit older with the Chevelle. I don't exactly remember the details, but it was probably, I mean, it was under 20. And at about the age of 20, I had joined a service station, a Sunoco service station, when you actually used to be able to get your car's work done where you filled up. And it was a 2-bay garage in Norwalk, Connecticut. And the garage was owned by Bob Kulska, and Craig owned the repair facility there. And the two of them taught me a ton. Unfortunately, I didn't work with my father in the industry. I worked with him in construction. And ultimately, what I learned from him is I did not want to be in construction. He turned me away from automotive, tried to anyway. And despite that, I went to one of his high school buddies and offered to sweep the floor in the garage. And that's where I started in terms of the professional career side of the automotive industry.
So did your dad want you to be in construction?
I don't know if he wanted me to be in construction. Gosh, he pushed for some school and the like, and I did attempt school. And it wasn't until I found programs that were in line with what I wanted to learn that I was able to do well. And I did find an automotive program. It was a General Motors ASEP program. And, I graduate high school with just a high enough GPA to play sports. And then I find a program that teaches me about my passion, and I graduated with that associate's degree with a 4.0. And it was just a good fit.
Where was that class offered at?
That was Gateway Community Technical College in North Haven and New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay, so like a community college and a technical community college.
It was, and that experience of school really opened some doors for me, and it got me involved with STG. They did the training for General Motors, and through the process of going on for my bachelor's, I helped to pay all my bills, including my debt from the student loans, by training for General Motors in the state of Connecticut. And really offered me a lot of insight and a lot of tremendous context just by taking advantage of the people that were around me in a good way. We'd help each other out. To be able to sit down with a head instructor and have lunch and talk about the strategy of the PCM was enormous for me. It really helped me get a foothold in an understanding of the technology.
Were you still working at the gas station or I guess the service station at the same time you were doing school?
Initially I was, and one of the requirements of the program was that you had to work at a General Motors dealership in order to graduate with the General Motors endorsed degree or approved degree, however they structured that. So I did have to leave the Sunoco station for some time. And eventually when moved on to a Buick GMC truck dealership, and then to Eklund Automotive Test Center. And that was a really neat facility. I don't know, for those that have been in the industry for some time, that they're probably familiar with the brand Eklund. At the time, they owned Rebestos, so Rebestos friction brakes and the like. Mr. Gasket, Hurst, Excel, Mallory, Hamburger oil pans at the time, a few others as well. And that job was particularly interesting for several reasons. One is I worked in an emissions lab, and it was my job to work on obtaining test data that was submitted to the EPA for CARB executive order numbers on aftermarket parts. Some of our customers ran the gamut. We did a lot of the testing for the Eklund parts, but we also had Callaway Cars, was probably the most prestigious customer. The other part of that job was product, both design and production validation testing. So long story short, I got to break stuff and help the engineers figure out why it broke. And that was really cool. And that was really the first job out of the after my bachelor's degree. And gosh, if that job could have afforded to pay a family, that would have been a dream job for sure. Part of it was developing parts, testing parts on race cars, and so on and so forth.
So is that an engineering? I mean, that's an engineering position, huh?
It was, and when I first started there, it was a technician's position, and I worked my way up, and eventually Dana Corporation, I believe it was in '98 or so, purchased Eklund, and that was eventually led to Dana's bankruptcy in more recent years. But the bottom line there was I had to transfer out of Connecticut because they pulled everything out, and I accepted an applications and engineering position at DFI in Wixom, Michigan, which was digital fuel injection.
Okay. And that was through the Dana Corporation still?
Yes, that was and that was through Eklund that Dana purchased.
Okay. And so that was like a relocation package, I guess, as they shut down your facility?
It was, yes.
Okay. Okay, so you're a degreed engineer here. You're working for essentially the OEs is what you're doing, OE work. How did you get involved in like the aftermarket side of things?
Well, at that point, that was still aftermarket. Everything I've done, with the exception of some calibration work at digital fuel injection, was aftermarket.
Okay.
The OE work that I was exposed to there was calibration work on the airport tugs, man lifts, which are effectively scissor lifts, the Genie brand of man lift, and that was the only OE or tier 1 work that I was involved in. That was for a short time.
Okay.
My passion has been making fast cars faster.
Okay.
And I've tried to focus on that. It didn't take long for me to get tired of tuning generator sets at 3,600 RPM.
All right. And so you're working out of a dyno cell for all this stuff, I presume.
Dyno cell. I also ran the prototype shop for a little spell at DFI, and we did have 2 dyno shops there, or 2 dyno cells there rather. And at the Wixom facility, we did not have chassis dyno at the time, which was interesting. The Eklund facility, we had 2 chassis dynos. They were water brakes, primarily utilized for emissions, but we did have 2 engine dynos. One was an Eaton eddy current brake, and we did a lot of validation testing and aging on oxygen sensors, EGR valves. And one of the difficult things there was actually keeping the exhaust manifolds in one piece. After 250 hours, you'd be amazed at what temperature does to those tubes. But we also had some brake dynamometers and friction material machines, link machines, to measure coefficient of friction.
Okay. You're working at all these companies here, and they moved you to Michigan. Did you have a family at that time?
I had when I moved to Michigan, our son was probably 2.
Okay.
And the family was in Connecticut, brother, sister, parents. And when I went to Michigan, it was myself, my girlfriend at the time. We weren't married yet.
Okay.
And our 1.5, 2-year-old. So it was interesting to chase the job, so to speak, or go where the work is, and presented its own set of circumstances that certainly that alone didn't lead to a divorce, but they certainly contributed.
Okay, and you mentioned it that the pay there was really not good enough for a family, I guess is what you implied, but was that the case? Like, you're working for major, like tier 1 manufacturers, I assume, because Dana's was a tier 1 company, but was the pay really not all that great?
Everything like that is so subjective, and my wife tells me I'm not cheap. So could you have raised a family on that single income? Maybe, but that wasn't my experience. And it was entry-level position. And
okay.
What I have found is that to further yourself in terms of pay, unfortunately, a lot of times you need to move from one company to another.
Okay.
From there, in 99, I went to SuperChips. And this was really I don't want to call it a startup at the time, but it was before we had tremendous growth. Hypertech was the largest competitor, and the technology that we were working with was advanced for its time, But in hindsight now, it's like, holy smokes, how did we make that work? And so, for instance, we were doing custom tuning, and this was primarily in the Ford market. And we would write a file based on a sheet that was sent in by a shop, and that sheet would give us as much information as they could present. We'd usually have to follow up with a phone call, get some more additional information, and we would custom tailor a tune, load it onto a floppy drive, load it onto a BBS. The customer would download it, burn it to a chip, and then put that into the vehicle and test it. And it was relatively effective, but terribly inefficient.
Okay.
And really kind of neat how we have evolved to being able to give the customers the ability to do the tuning themselves in the industry. But so SuperChips was the next, and that was 7 years of my life working for that corporation.
What did you do for them?
I came in as a calibrator and moved up into a calibration manager position, and really headed from 99 to about 04, headed up the calibration department, and moved up into upper management by the end of 04, and really helped to guide the company. One of the more interesting stories there was, I'm sure those listening probably know the brand called SCT.
Mm-hmm.
That was SuperChips custom tuning, and that came as a result of SuperChips realizing, hey, we're spending 90% of our time custom tuning in this manner, and we need to make a product that's more efficient. But we did not have the knowledge and technological capability to really develop the product ourselves in a manner that would be timely. So a colleague, David Kane, and myself, we searched out the founders of SCT and negotiated a business partnership with those founders. And obviously they weren't called SCT at the time. They actually had to create an entity that could be purchased. And we didn't purchase them, but we put them up as effectively a spinoff. And the difficulty there was getting two entities that have similar visions but are ultimately able to compete to cooperate. And that was while it was a tremendous success for SCT, it was a failure for SuperChips in many ways. They created a competitor, and a strong competitor at that. And
to clarify this, you were working for SuperChips, and you guys at SuperChips were spending most of your time custom tuning stuff. So you went to the owners of SuperChips, and with them, you guys created SCT to compete. Well, not really to compete against SuperChips, but it ended up being a competitor to it. Is that kind of how I heard this? You
heard it correct, and I apologize. It's a bit complicated, but ultimately the goal was that the two companies would work together, and SCT would handle the custom market, and SuperChips Inc. would handle the consumer market, as we would refer to it. So that's basically the cars that are not heavily modified.
Gotcha. Okay.
And with having those two entities having separate ownership, I think they just wanted the same market.
Okay.
And so from that perspective, it was interesting to watch it unfold. It was very stressful. It was, one of these things that is ultimately something you've had a big part of from both sides, seeing the friction involved. It was stressful at best.
And SCT is very big now, and I haven't heard. I know the name SuperChips, but I haven't heard of them in a while. Are they as big, or what happened to that one?
Well, I think one of the things that escaped the management, the upper management at SuperChips Inc. is the shops that cater to the custom market are also the shops that sell to the consumer market or the vehicles that are not heavily modified. And you need to satisfy both needs.
Mm-hmm.
And the company that does will get more business. And I suspect that's just what happened.
Okay.
SuperChips Inc. was concentrating on relatively stock vehicles, and they're still around. They're still somewhat relevant. They're relevant enough for me to be working with them while I'm at HP Tuners still.
Okay.
And that HP Tuners relationship with SCT was a very similar path of, let's say, path of failure, for sake of a better term. It was an attempted relationship that did not work out. At the time, I attempted 2 relationships to cater to the custom market with SuperChips Inc. and decided to move along with HP Tuners because I felt that there was more personal growth opportunity and more market potential for someone in the custom tuning business as opposed to someone in the consumer business.
So give us an idea of how you were doing these custom tunes without the car. So you were saying that shops would send you a list of all the stuff done to it, and you guys would make the ROM and send it back to them? Is that kind of how you're doing it?
That is correct. And unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time for testing because the volume. So to give you an idea of the stress levels at SuperChips in this time period, we're talking 99 to 05. That company grew 801% in those 5 years.
Huh?
It's phenomenal growth. We were in Inc. magazine and so on and so forth. We were 1,000% in 7 years by the time I left in 07. And that's what I can speak to in terms of the sales there. But the growth not only in customer base, but the growth in personnel. I don't know which is more difficult to manage, but if you put the right personnel in place, the growth of the consumers is easier to manage. But finding the right people is just a tremendous challenge. And hiring mistakes are very costly.
Yeah, that one's one I can relate to. Hiring people is very hard.
It is.
And managing them is harder.
Agreed. And I think the better job that you do in hiring, the easier they can be to manage.
Is that something you dealt with at SuperChip, SCT, or HP Tuners, like the actual people?
It is. For direct reports, I think the most I had was about, I don't know, if it was somewhere between 9 and 12. The busiest year that we had, I forget what year it was, but we tuned, I think it was about 6,000 custom files with 9 calibrators.
Okay, so and that was over 1 year?
That was in 1 year, yes.
Okay, so yeah, you're doing quite a few tunes then, huh?
Yeah, and you're working with an 8-bit hex editor. There are some 16-bit tables. They're, from the technological side of it, you've got bit swapping and some other things that the editor doesn't handle well. The editor is only capable of opening 64K. The core file was basically 216K, so we had to
open and close it a bunch of times.
Pre and post process the files, manually check some of the files, manually with the aid of software.
Okay.
And it was just incredibly inefficient. But given the business load and the difficulty of hiring and the difficulty of convincing the owners that we needed the help, all amounted to we didn't have time to do the testing. So to answer your question, how did we accomplish tuning without the vehicle there? A lot of it was on the phone, talking with the customers, getting very specific information, as specific as we could with the factory scan tools that were available.
Okay.
On the Ford side, our sample rates might have been one sample a second.
Oh, so pretty horrible, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was. It was pretty miserable. Very, very difficult to do it well. I do think that, like I said, I do believe we were relatively effective given the tools that we had. And I guess just over time, some experience was what allowed us to accomplish the goals.
So you guys could build up a database almost of like cars with similar modifications that you've already tuned.
We sure did,
Okay.
yeah. And those were all maintained in text files in DOS. And we would have to go and search a particular strategy code and read over the notes, take a look at the files. Even the copy and paste was not a right-click copy, right-click paste, or Control-C, Control-V for that matter. It was a much more manual process where we had to save the file in a really just the size of the table, and import that as an overlay, add a particular address, and then paste it. So it was the process of copying and pasting a table. If you already had the tables to sample from, you're looking at 20 minutes of just copying and pasting.
So it sounds like you were managing people doing the tuning, and you guys knew and realized your bottleneck. And is that something you guys are pushing for the company to? It sounds like software development is what you guys needed better, right?
It sure was, and that was fulfilled by SCT, the third party.
Okay.
And in part of that transaction, their product was part of that, and so now we had a more capable hex editor, definition editor, and that allowed us to really get into the Oak family of processors, which there's no way we could have done with the technology we had. An 8-bit processor is not going to display floating points in the lake. So,
okay. So we kind of got into you moving into HP tuners, and so how did that transition happen? Because SCT and SuperChips obviously a pretty big company, and when you started with HP tuners, it was very small, right?
Yeah. So when I started with SuperChips, we were about 12 people. We discussed the growth briefly. And when I left, we were, I believe, about 63 people. It was owned by Griffin Investors, who owned MSD at the time. And the reason I decided to leave was just I didn't agree with some of the business decisions that were being made above me. We had attempted an entity called SuperChips Racing that was to cater after the custom tuning market, but we weren't offered the resources that we needed. So that's when I made that transition to HP Tuners, and that went from a pure management role to a sales and marketing role as their first employee. And when you're the first employee of a company that was started by 3 people that met on a forum, and all they wanted to do was tune their own cars. There is a lot of learning opportunity with all the work that has to be done, and that was just.
So those three were obviously like computer savvy people, huh?
Absolutely, and one of them was particularly good at software, writing the graphical user interface. One of them was particularly good at the reverse engineering of the PCMs, and then the third individual was capable of writing firmware and designing the hardware, laying out boards, and to their credit, the hardware, most of the firmware, and that was designed in 2006 is still selling today.
Very cool.
It is very cool. The difficulty now, though, is we face obsolescence and lacking hardware. So we're working on some solutions that'll remedy that. But
Okay, so you've been involved in a lot of these, I guess, new company ventures. So do you think of yourself as an entrepreneur, or do you have that like motivation to do new things?
I do. I have a tremendous motivation to do new things, and I think when I was younger, I was relatively young when I had my son, and I have 4 kids now, and I'm I don't want to say I'm adverse to risk, but I'm cautious. And that has prevented me from really going out on my own. And I'm able to get a tremendous amount of opportunity to use that entrepreneurial spirit in these startup companies that are in high growth stages. And it's very exciting. I sure wish I was an owner because the owners make a great deal more money than I do, but I don't necessarily share the risk that they have. And that's the, that. But yes, absolutely. Entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, at 9 years old, I was delivering papers. By 12, I was mowing lawns and had several accounts. At 15 through 17, I started a company where I was a scuba diver cleaning boat bottoms. It just, the need to, you need some good cash flow to play with cars.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's some motivation there, but building the company is the same if you take it seriously, whether you're an owner or an employee. So I do think that I do have the ability to take that entrepreneurial spirit and utilize it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're not totally risk adverse because you keep jumping from large stable companies to smallish startup-ish companies, which can be very dangerous, obviously.
Well, and to speak to that, so 7 years at HP Tuners. I've been in February. It'll be 10 years at HP Tuners. So the process of growing a company takes time. So, and I don't. I wish I can have a lifelong job and a pension somewhere, but I don't know. Well, I wish I had that security. But I don't think that offers enough freedom. And the other side of the risk is we have been successful enough at HP Tuners where we have outgrown my ability to market the brand. So I've actually had to step aside in the marketing side and allow someone else to do that job because the company has grown to a point where we have been successful enough that it's outgrown me. And that is risky, but you really need to, if you're going to make it in management, you need to hire your replacements. Otherwise, you won't be able to move up.
So did it outgrow your ability or just the amount of hours in the day that you have?
Well, those aren't mutually exclusive, I don't think. So yes, I certainly outgrew my ability in a couple of areas. One is time, but there are people that would be better at marketing this company than I will be.
Okay.
And I think that the sales side of the marketing job is largely relationship based, and that's what made the most sense for me to focus on.
Okay.
Because I've got a decade of founding these relationships.
Okay. Have you ever doubted yourself and thought, what if this doesn't work? And how do you overcome that feeling and move forward?
All the time. Part of it is, don't be afraid to fail. You don't learn a whole lot in success, but you have tremendous opportunity to learn in failure. And, looking back at the relationship between what evolved into SCT and SuperChips and what was HP Tuners and SuperChips. I mean, I negotiated with HP Tuners that SuperChips Inc. would be the exclusive worldwide distributor of HP Tuners product. And that was all agreed to in writing. It failed. And ultimately, it failed because the two entities had very similar goals with similar markets, and that is the takeaway that I learned from that, we need to, I guess, realize that when you're dealing in a partnership, and this is a business owner in a partnership with other partners or two entities in a partnership, that the expectations really need to be well defined. The roles really need to be well defined in order for it to succeed. Mm-hmm. And in the end, even though those relationships were failures, they served a purpose. SCT is still in the custom tuning business. HP Tuners is still in the custom tuning business. Mm-hmm. And ironically, I'm trying to take their business now that I'm at HP Tuners. So it's, I guess, how do you move forward? You just do it. And you use learning as your motivation.
Okay.
And, sometimes you have to walk away from the pieces. Sometimes you're able to pick them up and do something about it.
Explain the worst experience you've had in business.
Well, I think I just explained two of them. And that was really very stressful to deal with. But there was another scenario where I was offered ownership in a company. If I did certain things, I did those things, and that didn't come to fruition. And that letdown, particularly after that company sold, was significant, and it still bothers me today. But that's as much as I'm willing to say about that. But that was a huge letdown in my mind.
So obviously you lost out. If it sold, it must have sold for a decent amount to make you upset about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I can see if they went out of business, then you don't really care, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
So what's something you're doing right now that has you fired up?
Well, we are doing so much. There's new product development that we're working with. But one of the things that really fires me up, even though I have tremendous number of failures in it, is partnerships with other companies. And HP Tuners is working with SuperChips and Edge, which is called PowerTech. HP Tuners is also working with a company called eMotion. And we are offering file outputs that will allow a tuner to tune in person a vehicle, and then load those tunes, export those tunes, and load them into other people's hardware, and give the customers really cool dashboard displays or devices. And these relationships, I sure hope, work better than the other relationships that I've dealt with. But in the end, they're there to fulfill a need. They are there to get a user, number one, the product that is the tune that's in the PCM. But number two, an interface that's usable, that it offers the display that they want, as well as the ability to switch from one tune to another.
Okay, so you're getting away from not just being you flash a car and the customer doesn't see or do anything with it. You're moving into being able to provide the owner or the tuner some feedback, some gauges, instrumentation for everything, and multiple tunes and that sort of work, huh?
Absolutely, and I think it really adds to the customer experience. And it's we had many years of HP Tuners is a software company, so how do we develop more hardware that'll meet today's standards? And the answer was through these partnerships.
Okay. So before we move on to our next section of this, where we talk about your sales and marketing, I wanted to take a second and talk about our partners. If you own or work for a performance shop of any type, take some time to think about how organized and efficient your operation is. Our goal at Do It for a Living is to tell success stories in the industry and to educate you, the listener, on how to be successful in your business. My Shop Assist is a cloud-based shop management system developed to address the common shortcomings shops have. It enables you to track hours, pictures, notes, and even parts on every job at your shop. Manage your techs with the built-in calendar and assign tasks to them. The jobs can be exported to QuickBooks for accounting and billing. Customers can log in online and follow your progress on their car and digitally sign your work orders. MSA was designed to be simple to use and will help anyone from a one-man shop to the top-performing shops in our industry. Check out the system for free at myshopassist.com. Okay, so Jay, you're working for HP Tuners. Kind of tell us about HP Tuners and like how big is it? What kind of space are you guys in?
Certainly. HP Tuners, there are 3 owners, and it's a bit unique in that regard. There's an owner on the west coast of the United States. There's an owner in Chicago, and there's one in Australia. And, when they founded the company, they met on an internet forum and, I want to tune my own car. They put their heads together, developed something to accomplish their goal, and said, hey, this is marketable. And have really grown that over the past, decade plus to, we have a little over 20 people. We have about an 8,000 square foot facility that we purchased about a year ago, and we've already outgrown. All of our board assembly and production is handled in the United States through a board contractor. We're very proud of that, even though one of our owners is from Australia. That Made in America is important to the company as a whole, primarily for quality reasons. There are a number of us, particularly those that joined the company early on, that work from home. So we have a team member in Houston. We have 2 in Florida, one in Atlanta, and then the headquarters where we have nearly 20 people in Buffalo Grove, Illinois.
Okay, and the people working remotely are mostly salespeople?
No, we do have developers. We do have tech support working remotely.
Okay, so they're doing a lot of phone and computer work then, essentially.
Yeah, even if you're in the building and you're developing software, you're still relatively, you're buried in 5 monitors. So it doesn't matter where you do that work if you're a developer. But with the company making the commitment of the building and the like, we really wanted to be able to build a cohesive team, and it helps a bunch to be in the same building.
Okay. Do you guys have a formal business plan written?
We sure do. We have a 5-year and 1 year that are updated quarterly.
Okay. And it sounds like the owners share that with the employees then.
The key people have some idea of the 5-year vision. The 1 year, everyone's aware of.
Okay. And how on target are you guys with it?
Well, at this point, we're on target. Part of the reason we're on target is because we review it quarterly and make adjustments as necessary.
Okay.
So if there are, and that's particularly important in the manufacturing business with electronics, some of our lead times are 21 weeks.
Okay.
So if we know we're not going to have parts for a period of time, we may need to make some significant changes even to the business plan, primarily for forecasting and projection reasons. But yes, absolutely. The plan is very important, and it's very important that it can be altered in some manner. Doesn't necessarily mean that the goals change, because they don't necessarily, but the way we accomplish the goals will have to adapt.
Okay. Do you feel the business plan has played a role in the success of the business? Like having a plan, has that helped you guys?
Absolutely. No company goes from 4 people working from home to 20 people, and then who knows what the future holds, without a plan to execute from.
Okay. And what kind of advertising and marketing do you guys do?
We do a lot of online at this point in time. I think the trend moving online is been here for some time, and even the trends within online advertising have moved from the forums to the social media, for example. This year, we tried something that we haven't tried in the past, and that's no print, or very, very little print. So the printed magazines, we are not advertising there this year. We'll evaluate the effect of that on our business and adjust next year as necessary. And then we do some television as well. And interestingly enough, with print and television, you also have online components that need to be leveraged. Most important thing for a small business that's building is when you're advertising, you need to define what the purpose is, whether it just be a branding exercise or if it is a sales effort. And if it's a sales effort, you need to activate that branding or that advertising.
Okay. And so what's the most successful method you've used to promote the business?
Word of mouth, hands down, no questions asked, even today. And word of mouth is so much easier to find these days. And it's a double-edged sword because the good and the bad get out there, and oftentimes the people that are upset at something are much louder than those that aren't.
Do you guys have like a specific person to manage the social media reputations, like the online chatter about you guys, or is that salespeople's roles?
Well, we're in transition on that. For some time, it was salespeople's role to handle that. And it's funny when you talk about salespeople in HP Tuners. In January, I doubled our staff. I hired another guy. So we really are working on improving that business, and we are hiring consultants to assist with what that will look like down the road. And we are in transition now, so we'll see. It's moving from a role of salesperson to a dedicated position, and I would say it's probably a move that we should have made some time ago.
Okay. And how many hours a week are you working?
I don't know. I don't want to know. It's a lot. Working from home is a blessing and a curse. The technology is a blessing and a curse. I would like to keep my Facebook personal, but it just doesn't work out that way. The first thing I look up when I wake up is my phone. The last thing I look at when I go to bed is my phone. And I have every method of communication on that device that I utilize. So it's a lot. To answer your question, how many hours? It's a lot.
And it becomes harder to measure when you're doing it from home because you're not away from home, right? So you're just always there, always somehow attached to it.
Yeah, certainly. And then it's no different than when you're on the road. And I'll use last June as an example. I was home for 2 nights out of the month. And, that's what's been necessary to keep up with the growth of the company.
Okay. And how does your family deal with this? Is it, do they understand it, or is it just kind of like once this thing grows a little bigger and you can get some more people under your management, then you can kind of cut back, or what does the family think about it?
It's I'm sure they think I'm nuts. They probably wouldn't be far off, but they also understand that it is a passion, and one of the Scooter brothers from Comp Cams has said many times, you go from racing cars to racing businesses, and you're utilizing a little bit different of a skill set, but it is something that with the passion, it is doable. What does the family think of it? My wife, I God bless her, she puts up with me. I know she'd like to have me around more often. We have a 4-year-old. So I do try to take some time to spend time each week with them. When I'm home, it's easier working from home. I can go eat lunch. I can go eat dinner with them. Mm-hmm. But if I'm on the road, it's very difficult for them.
Okay.
So I've never asked that question, nor do I dare.
Right. Okay, so you're spending a lot of time doing this. Does the pay justify the time spent?
I think in the end it does. A lot of the pay is more than just monetary. It doing what I do, for me, it's what I want to be doing. And it really, of course, you work for a paycheck and it needs to pay the bills. But you can always spend more than you earn.
Yeah.
So it's all relative. For me, yes.
And you obviously enjoy doing it, which is why it's your passion, right? So
I get up every morning saying, I love my job. I love my job. I love my job. And some days it's true.
Okay.
There are certainly aspects of the job that are just nightmarish and very difficult to deal with. But the automotive aftermarket is a phenomenal business and is pretty incredible to be a part of.
Okay, so tell us about some of the tools you're using to manage your business, or what are you guys using?
Well, from a CRM, customer relations management tool, it's more on the support side than it is on the sales side. We use a product called Kayako, and it serves its purpose. It does make some things more complicated, but the reporting and the like is something that when we're able to look at the aggregated data, it's valuable for trend spotting and where we can improve. There are probably better tools out there that we may run across and implement. It is a significant amount of work to make it effective, though.
Okay. And you guys use QuickBooks for accounting?
We do, and QuickBooks seems to fulfill that role reasonably well, but we do have a business consultant that is helping us through, and we are probably to the point where QuickBooks will need to upgrade to something more customizable.
Okay. Yeah, and that's actually a pretty common thing I've been hearing lately is people, when they start getting bigger companies, using consultants to help them with QuickBooks, because it's extremely powerful software, but it's also, if you're doing it wrong, it can be extremely damaging.
Yeah, certainly. And that's accounting is too closely linked to the IRS to make a mistake.
Right. Okay. And so do you guys, more about kind of your marketing and side of things, do you guys sponsor any customer cars?
We do. And we actually sponsor a couple of ways. When we're sponsoring a customer car, we're typically looking for someone that is not only fast, but has a following and has some eyeballs on them.
Okay. So like content generators in the automotive world, essentially, huh?
Absolutely. And it's content generators that are digested or taken in by those that have the ability to possibly tune their own car,
okay,
which is a bit of a commitment on the customer's part.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys do written contracts with these sponsored cars?
No, no more than an email.
Okay.
And I think it works out well that way because things change pretty drastically throughout the year. Perhaps we might benefit from a contract, but I don't know where it would help us.
The monetary value you're handing out is not that significant, though, right?
That's true. It's generally product.
Okay.
So from our perspective, it's we're not doing any $20,000 sponsorships. Let's put it that way. Okay.
So what are some of the expectations you get from your sponsored cars?
First and foremost is to use the product. It's and that's not just to say tune it once and be done with it, but we want our sponsored drivers to be utilizing our HP tuners and race render products and sharing that information, sharing their race experiences, and so on and so forth in social media, and really help to generate a following and get us some brand impressions.
Okay. And you guys are obviously a racing product, right? So everybody in this industry is kind of like devoted towards going faster. So, as a racing product, it's difficult to find people to sponsor when everybody's asking for help, right? So how do you choose those people, other than content generators? Like, how do you know who's the ones to work with?
A lot of individuals that are looking for sponsorship are just looking for free parts. And
I guess that's what I was getting at.
they're pretty much pretty easy to look at because there is no proposal. And if you are seeking sponsorship, let the manufacturer know or the sponsor know what you can do for them, and ask what they want done for them, because what you say you can do might not be necessarily what they want. And same token, on the manufacturer side of it, or the person that is doing the sponsoring, let your sponsored drivers know what you expect of them.
Okay.
And I think generally you build a relationship over some time. Our product's relatively complicated, so turnover even at the sponsorship level is not desirable.
Okay. And even your own car is that Mustang is your car, right?
It is, yes.
Okay. It is obviously a rolling billboard for HP tuners, right? So,
yeah.
And now that is done as a company expense. Not you're not like a sponsored person. You're showcasing it as a company product, right?
So that's the beauty of having 3 engineers owning the company. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they may not understand the value of marketing. For instance, the truck and trailer that are branded HP tuners, those are personally owned. The company's investment in that was effectively the decals, mm-hmm. the wrap, so on and so forth. I did receive some investment from the company on some of the parts to get us to SEMA last year with the Mustang.
Okay.
But it's largely personally funded.
Okay.
It's I have enough personal deductions that it makes some. I don't know if it ever makes tax sense to go racing, but how do you make $1 million in racing? You start with 10 million.
All right. And how are you guys measuring the return from your arrangements with sponsorship?
Views, eyeballs. So it is a bit of a branding exercise, and in branding exercises, you need to know how many people you get in front of. And that car has, from that one event in New Jersey, we received a couple pieces of editorial. We also have some TV opportunities that we're pursuing at this point. So we won't know for another 6-8 months what that's going to end up looking like, but our consultants that we have hired and are going to help us measure the performance.
Okay. All right. And how do you guys choose what platforms to work with as far as cars go? I mean, it was originally all LS, LS1, I guess that was the big one then, but all the Chevy stuff was originally what you guys were working on, right?
Sure. So let's go back to our mistakes real quick. SuperChips, I think, made a mistake by abandoning those that handled custom tuning. Custom tuning is what built SuperChips. That experience, including working with SCT and HP tuners at SuperChips, has allowed me to learn that you don't want to abandon what built you. So we're going to maintain our spend in General Motors, but we do have a very significant market share there that we need to effectively defend. So at this point, we have tremendous opportunity in Ford. That's why I purchased a Mustang, so that we can pursue that Ford business. Current model year in this industry, at least at the manufacturer level, is where the sales are. That's why we chose a 2015. If I could have, I would have bought a 2016, but I got such a smoking deal on that car with. It was at a Honda dealer, 60 days on the lot, and it had 1,500 miles on it.
So it's essentially brand new.
It is, and they also I traded in which breaks my heart to have had to, but it's a E39 BMW M5, which 4-speed, 400 horse, very similar suspension to what's under the Mustang now. So it's it was time to let that car go and move on, and did pretty well in that regard. And I think we'll have the we'll see we'll see how effective it is.
Okay, so you guys are essentially making a business decision on what cars to develop products for. It's not a personal preference. You don't say, you know what, I really like the Mustang, let's do that one, right?
Well, there's a few ways to evaluate that, and what it comes down to is the customers have to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't always necessarily mean what you hear the most. It makes the most sense in terms of market. What you hear the most is what nobody offers anything for, and that may be a little misleading, because you may have 20 guys that bug you once a day, and it looks like, wow, we're getting one inquiry a day on this, well, let's support it. And you go and you sell 20 of them. So we do take a look at it from a business perspective, but most importantly, we look at it from a technological perspective. What can we do?
Okay.
Because the big difficulty for us in reverse engineering these PCMs is, can we accomplish it? And if the answer is no, we may tie up 6 engineers for a year on something that we can't deliver on. So we need to be able to do it technologically, number one. Then we look at the market.
Okay, and this technology for ECUs and factory computers versus aftermarket computers has really gone a long ways in the last, I would say even in the last 10 years. It's gone from everybody using factory computers to some really advanced aftermarket, standalone ECUs. Is that does that play into your business decisions? I mean, or are you guys looking to develop products to compete against those? And some examples I'm thinking of are like, we've interviewed Pro EFI, we've interviewed the Haltech people. Some of those guys I feel like are starting to get on board with the domestic side of things as well now, right?
Well, I think what it comes down to is the level of competitiveness of the vehicle and what the purpose of the vehicle is. The OEM PCM is very difficult. You're not going to find an aftermarket ECU that has even a small, the amount of development time that GM, Ford, and Dodge put into their computers, you're not going to find that elsewhere.
Right.
It just isn't going to exist in the aftermarket. So there is the robustness of the platform. The second is the ease of use. While tuning can be looked at by many as very complicated and something that they may or may not want to pursue, it is easiest to take a late model vehicle and tune the PCM that's in it, as opposed to swapping wiring harnesses and so on and so forth.
Okay.
It's also very likely more cost effective. There are limits, though. Where those limits are, that's debatable. I mean, we have customers, late model racecraft in Texas, and their blue Corvette tuned that to 2,500 horsepower with an OEM PCM. They had tremendous challenges at that power level, and they ultimately went to a standalone. But each one serves a purpose. Mm-hmm. And, I would say this day and age, current or recent model year production, I mean, if you're looking for under 1,000 horsepower, the OEM PCM in most cases is more than capable.
Okay.
And effective.
Okay. Okay, so before we continue on to the more about yourself here, I want to take a second and talk about a class that we're put together
is hosting
with
a
EFI
new class
University.
called Essentials of Operating a Shop. If you're interested in learning how to run your shop more efficiently, this class is for you. For details and to find a class near you, go to EFI101.com and look for the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. Our next class is being held in Denver, Colorado on July 16th, followed by Houston, Texas on August 13th. Be sure to use the coupon code DIFAL for $50 off when you sign up. Okay, so we talked about what you're doing at HP Tuners here. So what's something that you struggle with business, and how do you deal with it?
Time management, probably. It's a bit of a chore. And ultimately it is a balance of available time versus what has to be done. Time management is probably my biggest struggle.
And can you give our listeners an action item they can take away, like suggest something that they can do to improve their situation?
Yeah, I think so. And that is, if there's something that you've been afraid of failing at, provided you're not going to have bodily injury or something to that effect, go do it. Go fail at it. Learn from it. Do it again. And I think that losing that fear of failing just removes some obstacles that aren't there in the first place that you're putting up, and just go do it, whatever it is.
Okay. So let's close this thing out here with some quick answer questions here. So tell us a game-changing product you've seen in the last year, and generally this is for the performance aftermarket industry.
So from the performance aftermarket, the relationships that HP Tuners has formed with other third parties has potential to change the tuning industry again, where you can utilize products from more than one company to develop a package that can be resold.
Okay. What's the software program you use daily?
HP Tuners, of course.
Do you have a favorite app that you're using daily?
Track Addict. HP Tuners actually has a phone app, and this isn't just a sales pitch. Track Addict on the iOS store and on Android store is a data logger for your phone.
Is it like a GPS data logger, like track mapping sort of thing, or is it? Are you using like Bluetooth dongles or something?
Both, and it scales to whatever level you would like, and you can't beat the price. It's free.
Oh, awesome. Okay, and what's your favorite shop tool?
I love my welder, but in thinking about that, I've got to say my PC.
Okay. And what kind of car are you driving right now?
When the 2015 Mustang is running, I love driving that car, but otherwise 2004 Dodge Cummins.
Okay, and that's what you're towing the car with?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so let's close this thing out here. So what do you think the future of automotive performance is going to be?
Well, long and short of it is complicated. And what we have is pressure from the EPA to make the OEMs make vehicles that are more efficient. So I think we'll see some more turbocharging, which is awesome. But the control strategies of the ECUs are getting more complicated as a result as well. So I think we'll see multi-levels of complication, but this goes back to failing and not being afraid to fail. If you take that approach and look at these complications as opportunities, it's bright.
Awesome. Okay. And how do we connect with you and your company?
HP Tuners website is www.hptuners.com. I can be reached via email is best at sales@hptuners.com. We also have the Race Render website, which is www.racerender.com. And we're on all the various social media, the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Awesome. Hey, Jay, I really wanted to thank you for taking some time to talk with us.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now.